A dusty breeze drifts across the small wooden porch, where a boy with large, curious eyes sits quietly, lost in thoughts he cannot yet fully articulate. It is here, in the heart of rural New Mexico, that a quiet miracle is about to unfold. One that will leave prestigious institutions and hungry media outlets scrambling for a piece of its brilliance. This is the story of Elias Morales, a modest teenager whose uncanny mind for numbers will shake an exclusive school to its core, challenge arrogant professors, and provoke a national debate about talent, ambition, and the right to shape one's own future. Elias Morales lived in a single-story house built from faded adobe bricks on the fringes of a forgotten town near the New Mexico-Arizona border. The wind-blown sand clung to every surface, painting the settlement a perpetual shade of dusty brown. His father worked odd jobs at a local mechanic's garage. His mother cleaned rooms at a small motel by the highway. They barely managed to pay their bills, but they always found a little extra to nurture Elias's curiosity. From a young age, Elias had exhibited a remarkable capacity for mental calculation. At 6, he could sum up grocery bills in his head before the cashier even finished scanning items. By the time he was 8, he had started spotting mistakes in his mother's paycheck deductions. Yet, none of this turned heads in a place where people had neither the resources nor the time to dive into the extraordinary. Still, Elias's parents understood he was different. They scrounged for battered textbooks from second-hand stores, anything that might feed his insatiable interest in numbers. They would find him awake past midnight, scratching out solutions to advanced problems on scrap paper by the light of a flickering table lamp. While the rest of the children in town played soccer in the dusty lot behind the church, Elias balanced playing with them and devouring anything remotely educational he could get his hands on. The turning point came when an unsuspecting traveling teacher, Ms. Goldberg, arrived to fill in for a term at the local public school. Armed with idealistic dreams and modest teaching tools, she spotted Elias's potential during a simple algebra lesson. When she tested the class with a problem intended to stretch their skills, Elias took just a few seconds to solve it. She asked him privately if he had learned the technique in a more advanced setting. He shook his head, embarrassed by the attention. Miss Goldberg quickly realized she had stumbled upon a child with a mathematical mind that transcended standard grade-level work. Despite Ms. Goldberg's best efforts, the school lacked the resources to challenge Elias appropriately. Advanced placement classes were non-existent. Computers were ancient. Funding for extracurricular competitions didn't even come up in faculty meetings. Undeterred, Ms. Goldberg told Elias's parents about Crest Hill Academy in California, a prestigious private boarding school known for its advanced STEM programs and generous scholarships. Elias's parents were hesitant. California felt like another planet. How could they afford tuition, room, and board? Yet Ms. Goldberg insisted that there might be scholarships. She promised to write letters, gather recommendations, and do everything she could to open doors for the boy. That night, over a modest dinner of pinto beans and tortillas, Elias's parents discussed possibilities they had never before entertained. Their finances were limited, but the vision of Elias's future pulled at their hearts. In the following weeks, Ms. Goldberg helped Elias apply to Crest Hill. The process was rigorous. Essays, recommendations, and a battery of diagnostic exams sent in by mail. Eventually, Elias received an official acceptance letter. The scholarship covered most of the costs, but not all. His parents would have to tighten their already meager budget to pay for any remaining fees, uniforms, and supplies. When the acceptance email finally arrived, one of the only times they had used the public library's computer, Elias felt a strange wave of both excitement and dread. He could leave his desert home, venture into a realm that promised intellectual growth, and finally face the challenges he had always craved. But what about his parents? What about the subtle, comforting rhythms of his hometown? Those questions lingered as he packed his meager belongings into a battered suitcase. He held on to a few cherished items: a desert flower pressed between the pages of an old geometry book, a photograph of his family on his birthday, and a worn-out paperback about famous mathematicians that Ms. Goldberg had given him as a parting gift. It was enough to remind him of where he came from, no matter how far he traveled. Little did Elias know that this journey would upend everything he understood about himself and ignite a chain of events that would force him into the public eye, a place he neither desired nor fully understood. For now, he quietly said goodbye to the dusty lanes, to the battered pickup trucks that rattled by, and to the old life that was slipping into the past with each step he took toward the bus station. Crest Hill Academy stood on a sprawling campus in Northern California, surrounded by redwood trees and perched atop hills that overlooked a shining bay. The imposing brick buildings, manicured lawns, and modern science labs offered a vision of opportunity and refinement that Elias had only seen in brochures. When he first arrived, clutching his single suitcase, Elias felt the stares of well-dressed teens. They wore designer jeans, carried shiny new laptops, and talked casually about summer trips to Europe or ski vacations in Colorado. He noticed, almost immediately, that he stuck out. His clothes were worn, his backpack plain. The only pair of shoes he owned were dusty boots he had brought from home. Within moments, he sensed the curious and sometimes mocking looks from passing students. Orientation day was a whirlwind of introductions and guided tours. Elias quickly learned about the campus's state-of-the-art library, the athletic fields, and the dormitory wings that resembled boutique hotels. His roommate, a boy named Carter, looked friendly enough, but was often surrounded by classmates from wealthier families. When they talked, it was mostly polite small talk. Carter asked about Elias's background, and Elias explained, in halting detail, that he was from a small town in New Mexico. Carter nodded, but Elias could see the skepticism. The gap between their worlds felt immense. Adapting to the new environment wasn't just about social differences. The academic rigor was on another level entirely. Elias was placed in advanced math courses, along with a few other bright students. He noticed the intensity in their eyes, the seriousness with which they approached their studies, and it thrilled him. Finally, he had a challenge worthy of his abilities. Yet, the social arena was less welcoming. Whispers trailed him in the hallways. Some people gossiped about his background, wondering if he was a charity case. Others mocked his distinctly southwestern accent. A group of older boys made loud remarks about his boots, joking that they belonged on a ranch, not a school campus. Despite these taunts, Elias found solace in the library. Shelves upon shelves of advanced texts, journals, and online databases lay at his fingertips. He could spend hours there, sifting through problems, reading scientific papers, and writing down formulas that fascinated him. It was in that quiet sanctuary that he first encountered Professor Joaquin Ramirez, a tall, stern-faced man who taught advanced theoretical mathematics and was known for his no-nonsense approach. Professor Ramirez was legendary on campus. Students whispered that he held multiple advanced degrees from top universities and had consulted on government-funded research projects. He had a reputation for tearing students' work apart, forcing them to rebuild their reasoning from scratch. In short, he did not suffer fools gladly. During an informal meeting in the library, Ramirez spotted Elias poring over a graduate-level math journal. The professor regarded him with cold skepticism, noticing the battered clothes and the boy's apparent lack of polish. "What are you looking at?" Ramirez inquired in a tone that was more interrogation than curiosity. Elias held up the journal. "There's a paper about prime number distributions," he replied, conscious of his accent. Ramirez's eyebrows rose slightly. He snatched the journal from Elias's hands and flipped through the pages. "Do you understand it?" "I think so," Elias said, trying to keep his voice steady. "At least the broad points about the new approach to large prime gaps." Ramirez said nothing more, returning the journal and walking away. The encounter was brief, yet Elias felt a chill. He saw in the professor's eyes a measure of doubt, perhaps even contempt, for a student who dared to claim understanding of such advanced concepts at such a young age. Over the next few weeks, word spread that Elias was some sort of math wizard from a poor background. His scholarship status came up in hushed conversations. Some viewed him as an intriguing prodigy, someone who might put Crest Hill on the map at national competitions. Others saw him as a curiosity, an outsider who did not belong. Elias did his best to focus on his studies. He endured the isolation, the subtle jabs, and sometimes direct insults. He resolved that if he could excel in the classroom, perhaps acceptance would follow. Late nights found him reviewing college-level coursework, working through proofs, and quietly performing mental calculations that made even well-trained students struggle. Still, the social chill persisted. Nothing, however, could prepare Elias for the showdown that was looming, an event orchestrated by none other than Professor Ramirez, who had his own agenda for testing the young upstart's abilities. The tension between Elias and Professor Ramirez reached its peak during the 4th week of the fall semester. One crisp morning, the advanced math class buzzed with anticipation. A rumor circulated that Ramirez was about to test the entire group with a notoriously difficult problem, one rumored to have stumped graduate students for decades. Some believed it was purely theoretical, lacking a neat solution. Others insisted it had been cracked by a small circle of experts, but never published widely. Elias arrived to class early, setting his worn notebook and pencil on the desk. It was a spacious lecture hall for only 20 students, but that day, it felt stifling. Professor Ramirez strode in precisely at 8 o'clock, his face unreadable. He tapped the smartboard, and a complex lattice of equations appeared. It started with advanced algebraic constructs and seamlessly wove into higher dimensional geometry. A quiet murmur swept through the room. "I've heard some of you believe you are quite advanced," Ramirez said, scanning the rows. His gaze landed on Elias for a fraction longer than on anyone else. "Let's see if you can handle this." He explained that the problem was not in any of the textbooks they had. It was a composite challenge, bridging multiple branches of mathematics. The professor's tone dripped with condescension, an undercurrent of hostility that made the class fidget nervously. Half an hour passed in tense silence. Students tried in vain to make sense of the labyrinthine puzzle. Occasionally, someone would scrawl a fraction of a solution on a piece of paper, only to scratch it out moments later. As the clock ticked, the sense of doom grew. Nobody was making progress. Ramirez paced at the front of the room, looking smug. Elias, however, felt a peculiar calm wash over him. Although the problem seemed monstrous, his mind started pulling threads from memory, concepts from number theory, geometry, and advanced algebra. Quietly, he began writing in his notebook, line after line of carefully reasoned steps. For the first few minutes, it was chaotic. Then, patterns emerged. Each line of reasoning clicked into place. After an intense half-hour, Elias stopped. He glanced at his notes, rechecking each step. The solution appeared solid. Professor Ramirez, noticing movement, seized the moment. "Morales," the professor barked, "are you giving up, or do you think you have something?" Elias swallowed hard. His classmates twisted in their chairs to gawk at him. A couple smirked, expecting him to crash and burn in front of everyone. I have a solution, Elias said quietly. The professor's eyes narrowed. Come to the board. Trembling slightly, Elias walked to the front, carrying his notes. His voice quavered at first, but as he began writing out the equations, a calm confidence returned. He explained each deduction, referencing advanced theorems that even some seniors in the room had never heard of. Ramirez's face grew stern. The students watched with bated breath. It took Elias 15 minutes to detail the entire solution, from the initial approach to the final proof. When he finished, the chalkboard was filled with equations that looked like an intricate web. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, in a measured tone, Ramirez attempted to pick apart the logic. Explain why you assumed integrality in the third step, he demanded. Elias explained, referencing a bridging theorem about prime factors in polynomial expressions. His explanation was succinct, unyielding, and precise. The professor's scowl deepened. He challenged another part of the solution, but Elias parried effortlessly. One by one, every question Ramirez posed fell apart under Elias's thorough reasoning. By the time the bell rang, the entire class had witnessed something extraordinary. A boy they had dismissed as a backwater scholarship kid had just solved a problem that confounded their respected professor. The transformation was instantaneous. Some of the students stared in awe, some with envy, and some with newfound respect. A few even looked afraid, as though they were in the presence of something uncanny. Ramirez lowered his gaze. Class dismissed, he announced in a stiff voice, ignoring Elias as he gathered his notes. The room erupted into hushed chatter. A crowd of curious classmates gathered around Elias, bombarding him with questions. Outside, rumors spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, nearly everyone on campus was talking about Elias Morales, the math wizard who had just put Professor Ramirez in his place. That evening, Elias walked alone to his dorm, replaying the day's events in his mind. He was relieved that he had proven himself academically, yet something felt off. The sudden swarm of attention made him uncomfortable. Students who had never acknowledged him before were now asking to study with him, while a few others glared at him as if he were a threat. He realized with a start that his life at Crest Hill would never be the same, and he was right. The challenge had ignited a spark that would blaze beyond the confines of the campus, attracting all the wrong kinds of attention. News of Elias's feat did not stay contained within the school for long. A student journalist from Crest Hill's online newspaper published a story titled, "Scholarship Student Outsmarts Legendary Professor," complete with quotes from classmates who had witnessed the event. That story was picked up by a regional education blog, which in turn caught the eye of a local TV station. Before Elias could comprehend what was happening, reporters were calling the school, requesting interviews. The administration initially tried to shield him, but soon saw the publicity as beneficial. Crest Hill Academy's name was plastered across news articles and social media posts. Suddenly, Elias's face was on local evening broadcasts, though often in grainy images taken by classmates' cell phones. Journalists speculated about his background, painting him as the desert genius from an impoverished town. They portrayed him as a Cinderella figure in the high-stakes world of competitive academics. Within days, representatives from several universities started making inquiries. Some sent emails, others called the school to talk to the principal. Even staff from government research labs asked about Elias's capabilities. That was when an odd rumor began surfacing, whispers that Elias had once been part of a secret program for gifted children. No one knew the details, but the rumor gained traction quickly. A few obscure articles and old documents started circulating online, hinting at a hush-hush experiment funded by a federal agency that sought out young prodigies. For Elias, the attention was overwhelming. He would arrive at class to find a small crowd of onlookers waiting outside. Students who had previously sneered at him now tried to befriend him, hoping some of his brilliance might rub off. Teachers asked him loaded questions about his past, fishing for confirmation about the rumored program. Elias felt trapped, uncertain of what was fact or fiction anymore. One afternoon, as he hurried between classes, a local TV reporter cornered him. Microphone thrust in his face, cameras rolling, she asked, "Elias, is it true you were part of a government experiment for highly gifted children? Is that how you managed to solve the unsolvable problem?" Elias froze. He had no recollection of any such program, though he did vaguely remember traveling to a facility with his parents when he was very young. He had been tested for something, but the details were murky, as if from a half-forgotten dream. His parents rarely discussed it, and if they did, they spoke in hushed tones. The reporter insisted that the information was out there, that official documents would be released soon under Freedom of Information Act requests. Caught in the headlights, Elias muttered, I don't know what you mean," and dashed into his classroom, heart pounding. The confrontation left him shaken. At day's end, he contacted his parents to demand answers. His mother's voice trembled on the phone line. She admitted they had enrolled him, at age 4, in a privately administered testing program rumored to be government-affiliated. They had been told it was a routine intelligence assessment, but they later discovered it was more than that. While they never learned the full extent, they knew some of the test administrators had high-level clearances, and references to future follow-ups had been vague yet ominous. Elias realized he had unwittingly been part of something bigger than himself. As the revelations broke, the media frenzy intensified. Some outlets praised him as an American prodigy produced by advanced programs, while others criticized the ethics behind such secretive experiments. Crest Hill Academy found itself at the center of a media circus, with journalists camped outside the gates. Fellow students grew weary of the constant scrutiny, and more than a few resented Elias for it. In this chaos, no one's disdain was sharper than Professor Ramirez's. He made cryptic remarks in class about how the media blew everything out of proportion, about how genuine intellectual achievement did not need sensationalism. Elias sensed that Ramirez resented the overshadowing of his authority, resented that a boy from nowhere could spark so much attention. University recruitment officers began floating offers of early admission and full scholarships, some even offering sizable stipends. Elias was only 16, but they treated him like a prized free agent in collegiate sports. The principal introduced him to administrators keen to leverage his newfound fame for donations and prestige. Even local politicians smelled an opportunity for positive publicity. If it was acceptance he had sought, Elias found something else entirely. Yes, people now recognized his abilities, but the cost was suffocating. Overnight, he had become a spectacle, an unwilling participant in a show he never auditioned for. As the weeks went by, he felt increasingly distant from his classmates, his instructors, even from himself. The only place Elias could find any semblance of peace was in the cramped attic of the library, a seldom-used study area among dusty volumes. There, he could retreat, bury his face in mathematical riddles, and forget for a few fleeting minutes about the swirling drama outside. Yet, the drama refused to stay at bay. One day, a federal official, an austere woman in a tailored suit, arrived at Crest Hill. She introduced herself to the principal as an educational liaison, but her presence carried an air of official business. Elias spotted her outside the administrative offices, whispering with the head of admissions. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. the old fear of being scrutinized like a lab specimen. What was happening behind those doors? Had the rumors about the secret program triggered some renewed government interest in him? The puzzle overshadowed every moment of his day. He tried to avoid the woman's gaze in the hallway, but he could almost sense her eyes following him, evaluating him from a distance. As he tossed restlessly in his dorm bed that night, Elias realized that the sense of belonging he had once yearned for was slipping further and further away. He had become a commodity, a ticket to fame, a curiosity. He didn't want to be any of those things. Somewhere in the swirl of rumors, scholarship offers, and official inquiries, he felt himself disappearing, replaced by the label genius. And that was not who he was, or at least not all he was. It was early October when Crest Hill Academy decided to host a special assembly in the campus auditorium. The ostensible purpose was to celebrate the achievements of outstanding students, but almost everyone understood the main attraction. Elias Morales, the principal, in all his administrative glory, extended invitations to members of the press, local politicians, university representatives, and even the austere federal official. Rumor had it that they expected Elias to make a speech, to thank Crest Hill for the support, and to accept a slew of lucrative offers. Sitting backstage in a stiff chair, Elias could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He wore a suit for the first time in his life, borrowed from the drama department's costume closet because he couldn't afford a tailored one. He listened as the principal listed the school's achievements, read out commendations, and introduced honored guests. The crowd offered polite applause. Then came the big moment. The principal cleared his throat, beaming with pride. Now, I'd like to introduce a truly remarkable young man who has brought national attention to Crest Hill Academy. Please welcome Elias Morales. The auditorium erupted in applause. Reporters lifted their cameras. A row of school board members smiled expectantly. Professor Ramirez sat in a corner, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Students murmured among themselves, wondering what the elusive math prodigy would say. Elias walked up to the podium, palms sweaty. He surveyed the sea of faces. The hush that fell over the crowd was suffocating. For a long moment, he simply stood there, grappling with a tumult of emotions: fear, anger, loneliness, and a strange sense of resolve. He spoke softly at first. I want to thank Crest Hill Academy and everyone who has supported me. I came from a small town in New Mexico, where my parents worked day and night so that I could have a better education. I never dreamed of a stage like this. He paused, glancing down at the prepared remarks typed on a note card. Those words had been vetted by the school's administration, the ones they wanted him to say. Instead, he set the card aside. But I also have to say, he continued more firmly now, that all this attention, the media, the universities, the officials, has been overwhelming. I've been labeled a genius, a product of some secret program, a scholarship story, even a pawn in some publicity campaign. None of you really asked me if this is what I want. A ripple of unease spread through the audience. Cameras zoomed in. When I solved that math problem, I did it because I love numbers. I love the challenges and the joy of discovering patterns. But somewhere along the way, my love for math has been overshadowed by everything else. By the pressure, by the headlines, by the idea that I should become some kind of national symbol. Elias glanced at the principal, whose face was now taut with anxiety. The row of university representatives sat up straighter, sensing something off script. The hush in the room grew heavier. I have a choice to make, he said quietly. I could accept these offers, do the talk show circuits, or become a poster child for Crest Hill's marketing brochures. But that's not who I am. I don't want to be an instrument. I don't want to be a genius on display. I want to be a person, free to learn and grow without being treated like a commodity. At that, a smattering of applause began from somewhere in the back. Elias pressed on. Yes, I'm honored by the interest, but today, I'm announcing that I won't be signing any contracts, and I won't be giving any exclusive interviews. I won't be used to promote anything I don't believe in. I'm just Elias, and I hope one day I'll get to study math without all this noise, without feeling like I owe everyone an explanation of who I am or why I exist. He took a breath, his eyes landing on Professor Ramirez. The man's stern expression had softened just a touch. Maybe there was a glimmer of respect or understanding there. Elias turned back to the microphone. I'm grateful for the education I've received here, but from now on, I'm going to learn on my own terms. I ask you all to respect that. The silence was palpable. Then, after a moment of disbelief, the crowd broke into scattered applause. The cameras continued to roll, capturing every beat. The principal looked stricken, uncertain how to salvage the event's intended narrative. Yet something remarkable happened. As Elias stepped down from the stage, some of the students who had initially mocked him reached out to shake his hand or offer a pat on the shoulder. It was as if, by rejecting the frenzy and stepping back into his humanity, he had become more accessible, no longer a freakish genius, but a brave teenager searching for his place in the world. In the following days, the news outlets ran stories that Elias Morales had rejected fame. Some painted him as ungrateful, while others celebrated his authenticity. The federal official who had been lurking around quietly left campus. University recruiters backed off, though they sent polite messages that their doors were always open. Crest Hill's administration scrambled to handle the aftermath, but they also realized that Elias's sincerity had inspired many students to question the relentless pursuit of prestige. For Elias, life grew quieter. The media clamor subsided. He continued attending classes at Crest Hill, though the dynamic had changed. Teachers treated him with more respect, peers with more empathy. He no longer felt the invisible chains of expectation and realized he was free to explore mathematics at his own pace. Sometimes, after finishing a complex proof, he would walk outside to the courtyard, letting the California sunshine warm his face, feeling the tension drain from his body. In the desert of New Mexico, his parents watched his televised speech and cried tears of pride. They might not have understood all the intricacies of advanced math or the details of the rumored secret program, but they understood what mattered most. Their son had upheld his dignity and reclaimed his future. Elias would eventually go on to do remarkable things in mathematics, though he did so quietly, without the fanfare. Each time he confronted a new problem, he remembered the kid who studied by a flickering lamp in a dusty house, driven not by fame, but by wonder, curiosity, and the pure delight of learning. And in the end, that was the most extraordinary thing about him. Not the genius label or the scholarships, but his unwavering determination to be himself.